When two great writers decide to collaborate on one book, it's not surprisingly that that book is going to be really great. Anne Hinsdale is the long-time principal curator of the Bronte Parsonage Museum. And I've read scores of books about the Brontes, and it is almost inevitable that very early in the acknowledgement, she is acknowledged as a source of inspiration and information in practically all of those publications. Sharon is an established author, a journalist, and a playwright. I just love her first book, Balloonamania, Bells and Devastating Divas. Not only because of Tullamore's own ballooning history, or the fact that there's a great story connected with Howard and a parachutist called Lily Cole, but because it's such a jolly, humorous book, although there are some tragic events to relate. Sharon's book on Maria, the mother of the Brontes, and Maria is so often eclipsed by the fame of all the others in her own family, and because she died at 38 years of age. But in Maria, mother of all the Brontes, Sharon allows her to stand boldly centre stage in a definitive biography with a really great appendix of Maria's letters to Patrick Bronte, where in the first letter she opens up or addresses him as my dear friend, and that was in August, to she opens up again with sincerest pleasure do I retire from company to converse with him whom I love beyond all others, and that's in October. And in November he opens up her letter to Patrick with the famous address, my dear saucy Pat. But to focus on the book in hand, as Rebecca Fraser, another doyen of Bronte scholarship and biography, she opens in her foreword to this book by joyously proclaiming, it is hard to imagine a greater treat for Bronte enthusiasts than a compendium of Bronte lore by two experts on the family. This opening ode to joy is not disappointed. From the start, the book is compelling. We learn of the evocative association of decorative fireplaces in Maria's Branwell's, mother of the Brontes. We learn of evocative and decorative fireplaces in her home in Penzance. And also, further on in the book, we learn about Eileen Prunty and her Bronte DNA. Eileen is from Care and is a member of the Bronte group. And we read about a shillelagh that belonged to Hugh Prunty in his humble abodes in County Down. These are all in stark contrast to St. John's College, Cambridge, where Patrick lived from 1802 to 1806, with a towered entrance, wood-panelled dining rooms, leather-bound tomes, and deliciously carved bookcases, enough to warrant an amelioration of his name from Bronte or Prunty to Bronte, with its classical mythology. Bronte, of course, referring to the god of thunder. The book also deals with schools. Over to Woodhouse Grove near Apperley Bridge, where the resident engineer for the Bridge of Banagher, Henry Renton, also hailed from. He was in Banagher from 1841 to 1844, but today it is Woodhouse Grove in Apperley Bridge, which was the focus on when Patrick and Maria, in their whirlwind Regency romance, burst into its full bloom, marrying within 6 months of being introduced. But the book is not all joy. The lamentable looting of Lousy Farm where Patrick Bronte was the first Bronte to publish a book in 1811, is not an easy read. Calculated neglect by owners and authorities have left this landmark in a woebegone state. The story, of course, is much more joyful when we read of the couple's next two residences, Clock House in Hightown and, of course, the Bronte birthplace in Thornton, which has been recently opened to the public and is now almost fully restored. And highly involved in that is Nigel West and his wife Sarah and Joanne Wilcox, a great friend of the Banagher Bronte group. They are leading activists in the Thornton Bronte birthplace, and it is now open to the public with accommodation available. So if you want to stay in the only house where Emily, Anne and Charlotte Bronte stayed, that's the only house in the world now, and that's open, I think, as of last week for Airbnb. And then we read in the book to the parsonage itself, and under a title called Forever Home. Anne Dinsdale's, and I love Anne's honesty and plain speaking, as she tells us when she began working there 35 years ago. She said, "I was thrilled to be able to step beyond the barriers into the historic rooms and see behind doors marked private. Here at the parsonage, I found my passion." The last chapters deal with Banagher and a sort of a film set for, what was her name?
To Walk Invisible.
To Walk Invisible by
Sally Wainwright.
And we were absolutely thrilled that the second last chapter is devoted to Banagher, and it's 6 very generous pages. It's called Afterlives, Hill House Banagher. So it deals with Arthur Ballynichols quitting Hallward, a lovely, wonderful photograph of Cuba Court, and a magnificent photograph of Hill House, exterior and interior, and of course 2 photographs of the famous pillar portrait which was found in Hill House. So for us it's a sensational read about all of the buildings associated with the family, and of course it's all the better for having that wonderful chapter which will help to grow the Bronte Association with Banagher in the years to come. So I'd like to thank Anne and Sharon for all their work on that, and to declare this book now formally launched in Tullamore. This is a mild launch. We drowned it in Banagher. Yeah. Right? Do you want to say anything?
Yes.
Before your talk. Yeah.
We have been made so welcome, honestly. We just keep having little moments where we feel really touched, don't we, at how welcome we've been made, the interest in our book, the interest in the Bronte story. We've felt like rock stars, really. just sat around drinking wine as people running around making it all wonderful for us. And the garden party launch, was anybody there?
Yes.
Yeah, on Saturday. It was just, and I actually said from the stage that Anne and I, for various reasons, have been to royal garden parties at Buckingham House. Me slightly under sufferance because I was with my husband, but we did go. And I said, this is better, because that sense of commonality, that we're all sharing this story and we're all enjoying ourselves, and the world's on fire, isn't it? And just have that bubble this weekend has been really special, because Banagher and Arthur Ballynichols were important. And I'm always interested in Mary Anna, because I think the ladies here pity the second Mrs. Ballynichols, married to Arthur for 42 years, married to Charlotte Bronte for 9 months, and then she lived in a shrine to her. But we're grateful for that, because so many treasures were preserved. But we're also talking here about Bramwell's at, and we've got a whole section called the Bramwell Pub Crawl, because Bramwell liked to drink. I mean, he's very sad at the end of his life, but yeah, so Bramwell, every member of the Bronte family in there, including Arthur, gets their piece in our place in our book. Do you want to add anything?
Well, for me, I'd never been to Ireland before, and we came last October to research the book, and we started out in County Down, and we saw all the sites connected with Patrick Bronte's early life, and then we had a car journey to Banagher, where we saw Hill House, where Nichols made his home in 1861. And I think for me, it just haunted me, and it's been a real pleasure to come back. And I think we'll keep coming back here. We've
We were so excited when Dr. Robert Morgan, who runs Bronte Island in County Down, when he turned up at the garden party, and we were just a bit pathetic, we went, oh hello, ran up to him. But the fact that he'd made a 7-hour round trip drive to join us was special, because there's two elements of the Bronte story in Ireland. There's Patrick Bronte's early life. He was 25 when he left Ireland for Cambridge, and then his life in Cambridge, which was fascinating, and the name changed. And he took us round all these places that we'd heard of, or it's quite vague, the references in lots of biographies, isn't it? But to stand there, having stood where the mother of the Brontes was born and raised, a very well-heeled gentlewoman of Penzance, and then to stand where Patrick set off, was to understand what a self-made man he was.
And there was such a strong sense of continuity.
Absolutely.
We met Brontes that were still living in Rathryland, and we met McClorys, who were descended from Patrick's mother, Alice. We met a descendant of William Wright, who wrote the famous book, The Brontes in Ireland. So it was just such a treat visiting there. And I hope that comes out in the book.
Especially when Robert took us down a little lane and through and said, oh, this is the mystery house. Well, that was like catnip to us. Mystery house. And then, so the house where he was born is very evocative, and it's almost iconic, isn't it? But the second house is where he grew up, and where all his many brothers and sisters were born, and that's where his childhood, before they went to the third house when he was a teenager really, and from there he went to Cambridge. But that middle house, imagining his life, but also putting it into the context of women's stories, because the Bronte sisters obviously were women, talking about their mother, because you would have thought they were found under a bush until I wrote my book. But then to sort of have a think about, if Patrick Bronte had some brilliant, clever, driven sisters who would also have liked another kind of life, we'll never know, will we? So all those sort of thoughts and reflections about Patrick in Northern Ireland, Arthur and Charlotte here down in Ireland, it's been absolutely fascinating, because it's a wider sense of the context of their life. And we hope we've done it justice, don't we?
You have.
Yes, I think. So we just have 5 copies for sale. One of them is gone already, so if you come to me after the talk, there's just 4 copies remaining, and Anne and Sharon, I'm sure, will be delighted to sign them for you. Okay, so we'll move on to the third part of the programme, which is Sharon's talk on Balloonamania, bells and devastating divas. So,
Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
So when we were coming here to talk about the Brontes, and James said, would you like to talk about the Lady Aeronauts as well? I said, well, yes, but what's the link? And then I learned the story of the devastating fire in Tullamore in 1785. I was just talking to Corinna. Where's Corinna? There. He was also researching the ballooning phenomena in Ireland. So, I am going to talk about something else that happened in 1785, which was the first flight by an English woman, and it's hilarious and it's entirely true. Now, are there any children here? This is a serious question.
No.
Right. James assures me that this talk is okay, so if I'm run out of town afterwards, it's your fault.
Right.
It's like the saucy Pat letter. People always think, well, you'd hope they fancied each other if they were getting married, wouldn't you? It's not, you know. And I think he'd called her Saucy Mariah, the way it's written, that letter. And that's by the by. He had 6 children, so you know. I'm just going to read the first paragraph of the chapter because it sets the scene, really. So, this is the hardback. I went on to write the paperback and change the title because nobody could say Balloonamania Bells, Daredevil Divas Who First Took to the Sky.
Yeah.
When I was being interviewed on the radio, people's teeth were nearly falling out. So that's it. And there's more research in here, including Mrs. Sage. So I shall just set the scene a little bit. And that is the name of the chapter, because, you know, it does what it says on the tin. Early ballooning was all about show business, and no one was more at home in the limelight than Letitia Sage, the first Englishwoman to fly. She was a West End actress whose steely determination and plunging neckline brought va-va-voom to the balloon. Letitia did not suffer stage fright, even when her performance was delivered thousands of feet above ground. However, exactly what that performance consisted of was a source of ribald rumour the poor woman never quite managed to outrun. Sorry, I shouldn't have itched my nose there, I've lost me. Yeah. Her landmark voyage into the London sky had all the comedy, drama and suspense an actress could expect. With more unexpected twists and a hit farce, a Georgian playwright could not have given the Mrs. Sage Balloon Show of the 29th of June, 1785, a better plot. James, when did the Tullamore fire happen in 1785? What month do we know?
May, yes.
Right, so this is all contemporaneous. This is happening in London, and that was happening in Tullamore, and they're absolutely linked when you look at the story of early ballooning. So, there we go. I love a clicker. I can work it. 1783, Paris. The Montgolfier brothers invent ballooning, and the first human beings fly free of the earth. This was an astonishing thing to happen. The crowds that gathered to see the early balloon flights were the biggest that had ever been seen on planet Earth. Up to 400,000 people were there, and they just could not believe their eyes. It was astonishing. The Montgolfiers called these balloons smoke balloons because they were made of paper, beautifully ornate paper. They would burn anything they could to create a fire, and they thought it was the smoke doing the work. Well, we know it was the hot air, wasn't it? They were heating the air. So from that, Balloonamania descended. It became the absolute sensation. It's actually called Balloonamania, balloon flu, influenza. It just swept philosophy, fashion, the world. People couldn't get enough of it. And one of the things that people couldn't get enough of was they started selling little fire balloons, as they called them. And it's usually toffs. It was usually men who were having a bit of a party, and they started setting fire to these little balloons and letting them rise. Well, of course, when you said bring a candle next year, I didn't know whether that was a good idea, actually, because you know, you've got thatched roofs, you've got wooden houses, you've got everything inflammable, and very drunken young men are setting off fire balloons. Well, we know what happens, don't we? What happened in Tullamore. Also happened in France, also happened in London. And the press was full of letters saying, could you stop doing it, please? You're burning things down, someone's going to get killed. We don't think anybody was killed in Tullamore, but I would stand corrected on that. So that's the very tenuous link with my story. But I would like to know more about that, and I'd like to find out when Carilla's working on it. So balloon influenza, people couldn't get enough of it. It was literally balloon hats, balloon dresses, balloon medals, balloon everything. And those hats there, that's a sort of exaggeration, but has anyone ever seen, I think it's Pride and Prejudice with Emma Thompson? And she's got that big hat. That was called the Lunardi hat. It was supposed to be a balloon. And then again, there's letters in the press, people saying, could ladies stop wearing those to the theatre? We can't see a thing. So, like, you know, everybody was very, very into it. And we have letters from the period saying, you know, the ladies were wearing balloon curls, balloon hats, balloon earrings, balloon brooches, balloon curtains. I've seen it all. So you get the idea, don't you? It was an absolute sensation, and it was known as the balloon influenza. Now, the first women to fly were two aristocrats and their lady-in-waiting, and they went on a tethered balloon in Paris. And then I have to find out what happened, because it was just before the French Revolution. It didn't end well. But the first woman to fly free of the earth was also French, and she was called Elizabeth Thibault. And she was an opera singer. Don't know anything more about her than that, really. And she was going to do it, she was going to do it right. It was for the King of Sweden, who was visiting Lyon for a very important trade meeting. And the man who flew, who was the pilot, was called Monsieur Fleurant, I think that's right. Don't know more about him, except that he'd never flown a balloon before. I mean, someone had to be first, it was these people. But what a woman, she stepped out dressed as Minerva. And she had the dress, she had the feathers, she always had feathers. And off they went, up into the sky. And then when they got high enough, Elizabeth burst into song and sang an aria. And plucky Monsieur Fleurant answered her, so he's trying to fly a balloon and he's trying to sing. And amazing, it's an amazing landmark thing. And they came back down, crash landed as they always did, and they'd made history. So, but again, and I'm going to say this again and again, I don't know how you feel about it here, but in England, they were furious because once again it was France. Invented by the French. Now the French has got the first this, that and the other, and we just blanked it for a year because we were so angry that they'd invented this fabulous thing. Oh, what is it? It's silly. But anyway, Balloonamania did finally cross the channel. And then, so the first men to fly that had been taken, it was 9/10 show business was ballooning. So the big thing then was to squire a lady into the clouds, and that would sell tickets, that would get people along. People aren't stupid, are they? If you stand there long enough, you're going to see the balloon for free, aren't you? so keep drinking, there are always balloon rides if you didn't go right. So what they do is they'd sell tickets, you know, they'd come subscriptions, and that's how they funded it. So there'd be carriages and meals and grandstand seating, but I'm sure my relatives were just sat about with them, going, well, if you stand here. Yeah. So it became a race between three of the most flamboyant aeronauts of the day. So up here we have Blanchard, Pierre Blanchard, that top one there, became the first person to cross the channel in a balloon. He's a character and a half. His wife was Sophie Blanchard, who, when he died, he says you can drown yourself or hang yourself because there's no money. And she said, no, I think I'll just be a better businesswoman than you are. Went on to be a fabulous performer. Here we have the Duke of Bologna, known as the Mad Duke of Bologna, so that's what you need to know about him. Who, there he's crash landing in the sea. And then we have Vincent Lunardi, who became the first human to fly in England, in Britain actually, as far as I know. There was a little hop by a chap called James Tytler up in Edinburgh, but that didn't really go as planned, I think. So these three hucksters are running around Britain trying to be the first one to fly a woman, squire an English lady into the airy realm, all these kind of ways you used to put it, taking out huge adverts in the paper saying it's me, you know, and they're all very, very arrogant, as they had to be fair. So it's Count Zambacari, that was it, of Bologna. Count Zambacari, mad Count of Bologna. He invites, or I think she possibly invited herself, a Miss Grice. Now we do not know her first name, and if I can't find it, we do not know her first name. And this is quite relevant when we get on to Mrs. Sage. She was invited to ascend from London in this balloon with the Count and a senior military man. And when the balloon wouldn't go up, she was treated as so much ballast and asked to get out. It says here that she is obliged to leave. She didn't want to get out, she wanted to make history. So she got out, Mrs. Sage knew all about this, she wasn't going to get out. So off he went, the mad count, and that was one thing or another. Lots of rude poems about it in the press. So, Pierre Blanchard does succeed in taking aloft the first woman, and it's a little French dancer called Racine Simonet, only 14, part of a French theatrical family that emigrates from France who were now working in England. He took her up in May 1785, and then her little sister was 11, Eleonora, she wanted to go. Her dad was riding underneath on a horse to make sure they're all right. I don't know what I was going to do if they weren't. And they both landed, and they became really celebrated, and they used to go up and do little acrobatics. But again, the French, I'm not counting them. So now it gets very specific. It's to be the first person to take an English lady into the clouds. And they've got to be in it to win it, and this is where Vincent comes in. Vincent Lunardi was the aeronaut. He was a darling of London, quite the playboy, had lots of lady groupies who were very happy to be the first lady to go aloft. But Vincent was always short of money. He declares that he is going to take an English lady and gentleman aloft. He's selling tickets, he's flogging it madly, he's displaying the balloon at the Pantheon in London, now the big M&S up on Oxford Street. Because it took money, because he needed to get the hydrogen to fill the balloon. Inflammable air, as it was known as, and a warning to the wise there. So they'd moved on from the smoke balloons and the hot air balloons, and now they were using hydrogen. That cost a lot of money. So, the people he's going to take into the sky are George Biggin. Why can't I just press it? Oh, here we go. So that's George Biggin, a very young gentleman scholar, balloon fanatic, dying to go up in a balloon. Vincent Lunardi and Letitia Ann Sage, an actress from the West End of London, who, as you can see there, was quite glamorous. Now, that basically turned into a PR disaster. That was an engraving that went into the papers, and 13th of May, this was going to happen. Huge crowd, they'd sold the tickets, all the aristocrats were there, the king was watching, and the balloon wouldn't lift. And it was absolutely mortifying. And the reason they said the balloon wouldn't lift in the press is because of Letitia's weight. Now, by her own admission, she was 200 pounds of embonpoint, which is you often come across in Jane Austen. It meant she was a curvaceous woman. You know, I think I'd probably been 200 pounds in my life. She wasn't huge, but it was an issue when you were trying to lift her off the ground. So that was an absolute disaster. She was called Junoesque in the press. It just really mocked, and it was really embarrassing. So they said, right, we're going to do it again, and we'll do it for free. That's what you had to do, otherwise you'd have a riot. So there's lots of these lovely scraps in very august museums and collections, like the Royal Aeronautical Society Library. Well, somebody will have ripped that apart when they were drunk and the balloon hadn't gone up. That's where that's come from. There you are. A lady of considerable gravity. That's what she was referred to as. So, it wasn't subtle, was it? Nothing about Letitia's story is subtle. But what a woman. What a woman. So there you go. I wouldn't mess with her, would you?
No.
No.
29th of June, 1785. So this is where it all gets very farcical. It's already quite farcical because Leonardis had to get back in the other balloon and do a little hop so he didn't have to give everybody a refund while I flew. So everybody gathers at St George's Fields in London. Again, vast crowds, but there's a lot riding on this now. Lunardi's reputation and Letitia's reputation, and George Biggin, who is basically funding it. That's the reason he's not getting out. He's giving the money. He should have been on the first trip, but Lunardi managed to finagle it, so it was just him going up. So they get there. Letitia decides, we know this from her memoir, and this is why her story is important. It's the first story by a woman in her own words of her own adventure. Women couldn't do anything on the ground back then. This was a vanguard of female freedom when there was no female rights or freedom on the ground. And nobody ever stopped women. It's amazing. You got to stop doing anything fun, didn't you? So she gets in, eventually. She didn't want to be mocked and jeered, so she waits. She lets the men do all the donkey work of getting the balloon filled and all the rest of it. And then she steps out in her plum-coloured dress, aerodynamic she called it, with the plunging neckline and the lace, and obviously the feathers in her hat. And she takes a seat. George Biggin takes his seat, and Lunardi is about to take his seat. And then, bearing in mind that Lunardi hasn't been able to get 3 people aloft in May, along to 2 other people. He's clearly paid to be on the balloon. So 5 people. And the worst thing about it, Letitia, was one of them was a woman. And all we know about this poor woman is she refers to as a lady whose name I do not know. So no match for Letitia. So they all got in, the balloon wouldn't go up, the crowd's getting restless, it's all getting a bit chaotic like last time. So the person to step out is Lunardi, the pilot, the only one who's ever been up in a balloon. So they're all obviously keeping the nerve, thinking, well, who's going to fly it? And it's going to be Biggin because he's made a study of it. And he got real credit in the press for that, you know, the courtly Italian who'd said, right, well, I'll get out. But he must have been absolutely panicking. The balloon still wasn't getting out, going up, and the heaviest person there wasn't getting out, the 200 pounds of embonpoint, because she knew what had happened to Miss Grice, didn't she? You get out and you're not going to make history. This was her big moment. Not going anywhere. So then there were 4. So then, of course, this poor woman whose name I do not know was off. She knew what she'd met a match and she got out as well. And the other chap was Colonel Hastings, the guy who'd obviously paid to go up with his girlfriend or his wife. So then there were 3. Poor Colonel Hastings. It sounds like he was practically in tears. He really, really wanted to go up in a balloon, but he was, as Letitia put it, was finally convinced of my prior claim. She was such a diva, I love her. So then there were 2, literally. Letitia and George Biggin, and then they went up. And as she went up into the sky, there was absolute applause, hats in the air. She'd done it, she'd made history, she'd stood her ground, she'd faced down everybody. She wasn't getting out even though she's the heaviest person there. And now she's made history. She's the first English aerial traveller. And she was absolutely lauded in the press for her achievement and her manly fortitude and all this kind of language. And she wrote her book. Manly fortitude that constitutes a heroine, that's how she was described. And she wrote her own book, Letter to a Female Friend, her sister, another actress who was in Liverpool, and it's fascinating. And I've seen a first edition, and they got it out for me at the Aeronautical Society Library. And I went, oh my God. I said, is it a bit like this when you get things out of the collection? He went, not really, no. And also, Brian Riddle, who was the chief librarian, it tends to be, they don't see a lot of women in there, mainly because they tend to be ex-airmen who are, it wasn't because they weren't welcoming. And I was looking at a very old print of Letitia with the gauze over her cleavage. And I said, I had the microphone, I said, do you think the Victorians, I said, sorry, Victorians have covered up her cleavage? And he said, in all my years, as a librarian of the Royal Aeronautical Society, I've never been asked to study cleavage. I said, well, have now, Brian. And he was chuckling. And we decided that they hadn't really, but it would be very much, you know, shapely.
I'd say he didn't complain either.
He was fabulous. We had such good adventures. Sadly, this is how it appeared in the papers. This is a Rollinson cartoon. Obviously, there's satirical cartoons of the time. Now, I like a satirical cartoon myself. I don't get too offended. But as I was driving into Tullamore today, I couldn't help noticing another obelisk, which is very tastefully situated there, isn't it? Well, we just won't talk about that. But that is the parachute, or a sage lady's second experiment. Remember the first one was lampooned, and this one. Oh my God. I think she would have taken that in her stride as much as she could. I mean, we don't know whether she had knickers on, only she would know that. So this is where we get into the sort of the sex element of it, because as George and Letitia were ascending into the sky, in Letitia's memoir, she says, because the basket, they're all very ornate, and they had velvet curtains, and she said, the curtains having come undone at our ascent, I took to my knees to tie them up. Now, so the crowd sees her drop to her knees, and unfortunately, George steadying her by the shoulder, and from that rose the myth that they had founded the Mile High Club. This lasted 236 years until I came along. Now, if you follow my career, the when I come along moment is where it all gets interesting. So, there is a bet. The reason for this is it was such a sexualised thing, ballooning. The double entendres were so obvious, rising and swelling and all the rest of it, that people didn't even have to make the joke, really. Loads and loads of poems in the press, very lewd, very lascivious, very Georgian, such as this. That's when we were still cross and making out that's what the French were like. This is Love in a Balloon, which was in the Gentleman's magazine. And he's saying, ah, madam, it rises majestically. She's saying, I feel it does, signor. And they're saying, damn, he's no Italian, but a man every inch of him. Loving a balloon. So this was the atmosphere of early ballooning. The minute people learned how to fly, men started taking bets on whether you could have sex in one. Just going to say it. So this was an actual bet in the gambling book of St James's Club, which is a particularly notorious club for drunken aristocrats, really. And they would take a bet on anything. Now, there is a swear word in here, and sincerely, if you don't want me to say it, I will say ducks. You okay?
Yeah.
Historical? I once said that to a WI and they said, say ducks! I thought, you have booked this talk. Right, so, it's a charming entry in the book since 1785, so again, it's that atmosphere of lasciviousness, isn't it? Of misogyny, really. Lord Cholmondeley, that's it, has given 2 guineas to Lord Derby to receive 500 guineas whenever his lordship fucks a woman in a balloon 1,000 yards from the earth. Isn't that delightful? Lovely, lovely people. But you can see that this was very much in the air. And Letitia...
Literally.
Pardon?
Literally, in the air.
Yeah. So George and Letitia had gone unchaperoned into the air, and that was the heart of it, really. That what were they doing up there? Well, we certainly know that she was on her knees and he was steadying her, so let's just have some fun with it. She says in her memoir, the rumour arose that I had fainted, which I absolutely had not. I thought, well, that is the least of the rumours, love, that was circulating. Not really. So, where have they pressed now?
Or the book.
By the book.
Behind the book.
Oh, yeah. I can only work with a pen and a paper. Anything technical and it all goes pants. Right, here we go. So, that is the spirit of the ballooning conversation. And people are drinking, they're down below. It's great if someone goes up, especially if it's a man and a woman and one's an actress and there's no chaperone. If you can't have a riot, you might as well have a sort of snigger. So, that rumour persisted down 236 years of history. This idea that Letitia had had sex in this balloon. Now, this woman had made this extraordinary, she'd made history. She was resourceful, she was brave, she was articulate, and she was respected in her day. But, because someone's decided on the Mile High Club rumour, that is what has followed her down, and that is it. That's all people talk about, and it drove me mad. Especially, so that is still on YouTube, 2008, you know QI? Does anyone watch QI?
Yeah.
Right. How far did Mr. Biggin go is the question. All the way is the answer. No, there's no evidence for that. Do you know what I mean? They wheel out the bet. Well, that's just a bet. And also it was taken after she did the ascent. So this all-male, I mean, I'm a feminist, but I quite like some of the men on there. There's Bill Bailey on there, so it is an all-male panel, but they will only have said what they were told by the researchers. So again, it's just taken as fact now. The researchers have taken it as fact that this happened. Didn't happen. I kept thinking, but I can't prove it, I can't prove it. to the point where it was serialised in the Mail on Sunday, the book, because the Mile High Club, I thought, oh great, but I mean, I'm a journalist, I knew that's what they'd go with. But I do say, I don't think that happened. I don't think she did. I think it's a misogynistic, sexist myth. And I even went on to Woman's Hour, with all my feminist arguments about body shaming, all lined up, and all they wanted to know about was the sex and fashion, so that's what happened there. And they've said, who was the woman who started the Mile High Club? Well, at the very least, it should have been, was this the woman? Because I kept saying, I don't think it is, I don't think it is. You can still listen to that online somewhere. So I thought, I'm going to go back to this for the paperback. There must be something somewhere that absolutely explains what happened. And there is. I was so happy when I found this in the British Library. Now, exactly the same week that Letitia Sage, this extraordinary woman and heroine of the hour, was at the Pantheon selling her memoirs with her little limp. Because when they crash landed, the boys and headmaster of Harrow School appeared over the hill, paid off the farmers, carried off the beautiful actress that had just fallen off out of the sky, you know. So she was a cause célèbre. But exactly the same time, across, you've all gone really quiet now, you're reading it, aren't you? Yes. So across town in the Bishop's Court in the City of London, one of the most notorious divorce cases of the age was taking place. And it was the divorce of Mrs. Errington. So people think the press now is out of control, but then they did the whole trial verbatim and sold it separately. People couldn't get enough of it. So here we have. She's on trial for adultery. Now, she didn't do things by halves, Mrs. Errington. So, and this all came from the servants and some of the men. So, for adultery with Captain Smith, Captain Buckley, Captain Roberts, Captain Selby, Mr. Walker, curate of Battersea, but he was in Mr. Clark, Mr. Daniel, Mr. Tritt, postmaster of Lynn. Don't make any jokes there. Mr. Lee and many others, which is given the whole of the depositions of the several witnesses, fully describing the critical, amorous and humorous scenes in this unparalleled trial. Now, I thought that's it. So, what's gone on is someone has gone and published a poem which is called The Female Aeronaut. And it's about Mrs. Sage, but dedicated to Mrs. Errington. And there you have that conflation of two women in the news, all that fana atmosphere, and it's just this really horrible, smutty poem, which I'll just read you a review. It's so bad, it's not even being kept anywhere. But what has been kept are the reviews, which in the paperback, so I'll just have to remember. And they just say, you know, such is the licentiousness of the age that these poems are being sold, and if there was a prize for the most asinine poem, this would get it. So there are two reviews. A review of this poem, it's gone from the world, or if it turns up, I'll find it. And there you have it. So Mrs. Errington was a sex addict or a bit of a girl, depending on your outlook, was the sensation in this court, and poor Letitia just happened to be the historical sensation here in London, and that is how their stories are being conflated. And it drove me mad, because I think people will believe anything, and received wisdom, don't have to tell you this, received wisdom is very powerful. Fake news now, isn't it? Oh, well, that's your truth and my truth. No, they're just the truth. So, then part of this sort of mythology about her was that she was so ashamed of it all that she went to ground. We don't know what happened to her. We do know what happened to her. She just carried on. She was an actress, and then she became a dressmaker for the Covent Garden stage. By the early 1800s, she was working for Charles Dibdin the Younger, who was, he put on plays and he was a playwright, and he was part of that sort of theatrical world, including this one in Covent Garden Theatre, where they used to call aquadramas. I'd never even heard of that. They used to flood the stage and reenact battles, like you do. And then, from there, she then went to Dublin. So one of Dibdin's associates ran the Crow Street Theatre in Dublin, and she went and worked there for a while. So whether she was on stage or whether she was working as a dressmaker, we don't know. We certainly know she played Lady Macbeth, and we think she was an understudy for Sarah Siddons at some point, but there's not really anything yet, because I'm still looking to prove that. So, what a woman. We think she went to America at one point with the son of an East Indiaman owner, one of the ships. Went round post-revolutionary America. What a woman. She wasn't going to go to ground because people are making lewd cartoons about her. That's not how you make history, is it? That's poor Miss Grice. There you are, Mrs. Sage, the first English female aerial traveller who ascended with Mr. Biggin in Monsieur Lunardi's balloon from St George's Fields, June 29th, 1785. They're very specific, at 25 minutes after 1 o'clock, and descended a few miles beyond Harrow in the Middlesex at 3 o'clock. So after travelling through the atmosphere. So what a woman.
Yeah.
And she did not invent the Mile High Club, and if she did, good luck to her, but there's no evidence. There you go. So thank you. Any questions? Keep them clean.
Did Mr. Biggin ever give his account of what happened or anything?
No. But he was a very scholarly man. And from her memoir, they became friends, and she was very pleased that he was talking to her about, because they were measuring sort of meteorics for the weather up there. And he was very pleased that she was interested. They had a meal. Early balloonists would always drink their Madeira wine, then they'd drop it over the side and try and judge how high they were from how long it took, because she did break his barometer in some kind of kneeling incident. Yeah, I just think how many people in the late 18th century were brained by it. And then later all the upper classes would tear a rope through, so they'd have the rope that comes off a balloon.
Mm.
So to stay at a certain height, so they could drift along and have their picnics, they'd have a trail rope, which was just banging over people's back gardens. And they were annoyed that people were annoyed by that, so they had to stop doing it.
Did anybody do any double entendre on her male companion's surname?
Begin.
Yeah.
Oh, is that Alright, what we're going to do now, you have to tell me about that after. Well, her maiden name was one of the Hall sisters. Now, I have written a play, and it's called Fly Me, Mrs. Sage and the Mile High Club. And it's just telling this story about what happened, and it's me and an actress who plays her. And I do say that. She's one of the Hall sisters, and she says H-O-A-R-E, as in frost, and I say not floozy. That's what there you go. Fabulous story.
Well done, thank you.